How are we doing, everybody? I am Jeff Hoke, and I'm here with Chris Henrique and Kevin Berdios. And this is the first episode of the Shorthanded Take Podcast, a Boston Bruins podcast brought to you by Couch Guys Sports and Exogun. Guys, the time is here. We've been waiting for a long time for this. And what are we thinking? What are we thinking?
I'm excited. We finally, get to drop the puck, so to speak, on the podcast. It's going to be fun. A little change of pace from, getting ready for the fall and hockey season that's about to start very soon. So I'm excited to get this going.
Yeah. I'm pumped. This is going to be fun. It's going to be a good podcast. I think we're, a bunch of hockey guys here that obviously big Bruins fans, but we'll be able to mix it up a little bit and get some guests on here to talk about different teams throughout the NHL. And we're ready to take Couch Guy over as the number one podcast. I've been saying that all along when we've been talking this up, especially on high heat. Where Couch Guy doesn't know what's about to hit him. So
it's definitely going to be a fun time. So like I said, this is called the Handed Take Podcast. It's a Boston Bruins podcast. I'm going to let Chris do a little explaining of what we do here. He's the one that came up with everything, so I'm going to let him do the talking on this aspect.
Oh, it's going to be real simple. So, kind of like we just said, we're going to be the official Bruins podcast. We featured on the Couch Guys Sports Network. Plain and simple, we're going to focus on the Boston Bruins and everything that's National Hockey League. I like to say that this podcast will pride itself on with a little, maybe some humor, throw a little bit of entertainment in there. We'll talk maybe a little bit of, culture, stuff like that that's kind of going on to kind of keep it fresh and interesting. But again, it's everything that revolves around the Boston Bruins and the NHL. Kind of off the name of the podcast, so Short-Handed Takes, we're going to bring you our hot Bruins takes. If they suck, I do think that we should have to go into the quote sin bin and get our mic shut off for at least 2 minutes. And then, lastly, we'll do a segment called Like the Lamp. And we're going to give you, tonight, some predictions on the upcoming season. And just basically Like the Lamp just kind of talks about just really anything kind of coming up for the Bees. We'll throw some predictions, other things that are out there. So kind of feel like it's a podcast for the fan, by the fan.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's going to be like I keep saying, it's going to be a fun time. But without further ado, let's get right into it. We're not going to do much tonight, but we will break down the off season a little bit. And like Chris said, give some predictions for the upcoming season. But we're going to start off with breaking down the off season. Obviously, the biggest impact was David Krejci leaving to go back home to his home country. Kevin, what do you think the biggest what's going to be the biggest issue with Krejci not being on this team?
Yeah, I think what I've said all along is Krejci, good, bad, and ugly, whatever people want to say about him. I know it almost seems like people, especially in Boston, are lukewarm on him at times, and then other times they love him, especially come playoff time. But what that guy did for the second line is unbelievable. He's more of a loss than people are going to give him credit for. I think it's a massive loss. The Nick Folignos of the world coming in are going to help, but I think that's more of a
6 players going, which means our probability.
I think that's more of a third line guy rather than that second line guy that we really were hoping to get back. Charlie Coyle is going to have to make a big jump. I think that's going to be the guy up right now, but the Bruins are going to shock us, I think. Things always seem to kind of work out in their best interest. So huge loss, but I think they'll find a way to manage.
And Chris, Kevin mentioned Charlie Coyle stepping into that center role. And Bruce Cassidy himself said that he was going to be the guy that would be the one to step into that role, and maybe a few others here and there. But Charlie Coyle was going to be that main guy. Do you think Charlie Coyle has what it takes to not take over what Krejci did, but in order to move into that spot to be able to center this team?
He's got the size. So he's got the size to play the position. The concern would be, one is his offense. Last season it was a down year. He scored 16 goals in 51 games. And then, he had a surgery this offseason on the knee. So it's really going to be a matter of, is he healthy enough? But two, yeah, I mean, this is a big bump up and step up for him. You know what I mean? Like, he's not in Minnesota, a couple of years back, and he was there, and he was, where he played on the line kind of, fluctuated. There's better players here in Boston. I was really looking forward and hoping to see Krejci and Taylor Hall for a couple of seasons, because I thought that would have been a special duo, especially with a full season versus just that shortened little glimpse that we got to see. But yeah, I think that Coyle has the ability. He's got the size to play the position. It's really going to be a matter of just the consistency, from that role. I mean, he's getting paid like a number 2 center, the money that he's making. So the Bruins invested in him a couple of seasons back with probably the thoughts that this was going to end up being the case someday. So now it's time for him to step up and, now to deliver.
And so, Kevin, Chris mentioned the whole Taylor Hall aspect of things. We were all hoping that he would be on that line with Krejci for the next couple of years once he signed that big deal. What's the next step for Taylor Hall here? Is he going to have to step up and be that number 1 guy now, or can you match up with someone else on that line and hopefully do what he did with Krejci last year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of both. No one's going to question Taylor Hall's ability to put the puck in the back of the net and his ability to really take over a game when he needs to. It's always been a question of really his attitude. One, it seems like he's checked out at times before he came to Boston. So does that continue? If he really has to kind of hold the hand, for a lack of a better word, with some of these young guys that may be they're trying to hope to take the next step, or it is that Charlie Coyle, who's a step or 2 behind or slower than Hall, does he get frustrated with that? And if he gets frustrated, does he check out? Because that's the real issue. But if Taylor Hall's bought in, we saw it for the short time he was here last year, how good he really is. I really do think he has to take the next step. He has to kind of take over the role of like, all right, this is my line. I have a bigger role that I've shown through the brief period that we got him for last year that I can do it, but let's tie it together for a whole year. And he's going to make or break that line. That's the way I look at it. He's going to make or break how good not only the second line is, but how good the Bruins actually are.
It's a good point by all. Let's move on to a different aspects of not just that line, but as a team as a whole. Obviously, they signed Linus Allmark in the offseason with Yaroslav Halak not coming back. You got Jeremy Swayman there now, and Tuukka Rask, obviously free agent right now, but he plans to come back, and he's having hip surgery. What's the expectation here, Chris? What are you expecting? It was a big deal for Allmark. It was the start. Everyone's saying it's starting goalie money. What are you expecting out of this?
Well, they're paying him to be, a number 1 goalie. So, I think the expectation is he needs to play like a number 1 goalie. I think what's good is that, I think that having Swayman as his backup, regardless of that cash, I think will also allow the Bruins to kind of motivate him a little bit too. I'm not saying maybe he doesn't have the motivation. I mean, he's coming here. It seems like he wanted to be here because he signed, rather quickly. He had some other options during the offseason. But I think it's a good move for Boston. I mean, it's a step in the right direction to move forward and pass the Tuukka Rask piece. But I also think too that, if they were to go the route and bring Rask back, you can always option Swayman back down to Providence. And, a healthy Tuukka Rask as your backup isn't exactly a bad thing to have. You're not asking to play, a rip of 6 or 7 straight games in a row. He's really going to kind of spell Allmark altogether. But, this seems like this is a guy that Sweeney's liked for a while now and had the ability to go out and get him for really just cash versus players. So I think it's a good move for the Bees. I think it's, again, a step in the right direction to start to begin to go and, have some time without Tuukka Rask. But, kind of caveat to that too is I think fans need to be patient, and they can't go and quickly, throw this dude under the bus the second that he has a bad game and gives up 4 goals to someone. You know what I mean? Because it seems like we seem to do that with goaltending here in Boston. So being patient and not looking at the dollar sign that's attached to him, I think is fair to start out the season despite expectations.
And that Allmark deal was quite a surprise to everyone. I know it was a surprise to me. we look at the line in front of them, and we noticed that was a big issue in that second round of the playoffs this last year, and Brendan Carlo being out. They signed him to a deal as well, Kevin. Quite a lengthy deal as well. Do you expect him to step up even more now? And you saw how that line played without him in the playoffs again when they played the Islanders. So what are you expecting out of Brendan Carlo this coming year?
Yeah, I think he has to make the next step. I think that's not just a Brandon Carlo thing. I think that's a Boston Bruins team in general. I think there's a laundry list of guys that need to really make that next step. And we said that, that was the talk of the town before going into last year. And I think a lot of guys did, and Carlo included. No one knew what to really expect from him. Came back from a broken kneecap, like, no matter how painful that just sounds painful. So, and you saw in the playoffs how important he is to that D. I know they brought in a couple of guys to kind of help with the depth of it, but Carlo's got to be the number one to go along with McAvoy. Those two guys are going to have to be the face of the defense. So, good, bad, or ugly, or like it or not, Carlo's got to be one of the guys that answers. And I fully expect he will, and he's ready to take over that role. And I think that injury made him realize, how valuable he is and how he really wants this opportunity. And I think he capitalizes. I'm a huge Carlo fan. I think everything about his game is exactly what the Bruins want and exactly how a defenseman should be.
And we saw if he can stay healthy, he can really make an impact on that line with Charlie McAvoy. And we saw how good the goaltending was when those two are on the ice together. And last thing we'll do before we turn over to our next segment, Chris, just overall as a team this year, are you what's your confidence level going into the season with what the Bruins have right now, with what we talked about, Charlie Coyle going in at center? You got the signings Foligno and some of the other smaller names out there. What's the confidence level for you going into October here for the Bruins?
Obviously I expect them to be competitive. I think this is going to be a team that can be in the playoff hunt all season long. Are they a top of the conference team? I don't think so. I think that, there's a lot of new bodies that are on this team. They had to fill out the bottom half of their lines with free agents that they had to spend money on versus being able to develop some players in their system to have and be ready. I think it's not too much to ask on what the development looks like for DeBrusk this year. Can he come back and have a good year? Can he be productive for them? Because he was piss poor, miserable last year for them. They're going to need him to be better, and if he is, and he can have a decent season, is he a candidate that can, maybe play alongside that Coyle and Hall line or something to that nature? The only other thing too, I think, is going to be more too is the defense. Can they stay healthy? They weren't healthy towards the end of the season, and that didn't help them going into the postseason. I think that Forbort that they signed is a good piece to add, gives him a little bit of size on the defense. He's not here to have to do too much. He can probably play on that second pairing. So it's really going to see if this locker room obviously can mesh. They get good defense. The defense can stay healthy, and then really you go in the postseason as far as your goaltender. So.
Totally agree with that. And it's my confidence level is about the same as yours right now. And it's all about, how this team can play as a whole, how the chemistry goes. And if that team can mesh well enough, and if they can, they have a chance of making it pretty far. And Kevin, I'll ask you the same question. What's your confidence level here for the Bruins? I know you mentioned it a little bit in your last couple of comments, but what's your confidence level?
I'm lukewarm on him, I guess. It's kind of like, okay, you saw how shallow our D was without Carlo. Once Carlo goes down, you don't have that big body to kind of throw their weight around in a physical series. You don't have the guy to kind of clear people out in front of the net. Yeah, Forbort, comes in 6'4", 219. Not a small guy, but not a massive dude. Carlo's still bigger than him. You lose Krejci, so you're looking at someone in that top 6 to 9 forward range to make a jump to help close that gap of losing Krejci. I'm not completely out on Allmark. I like him. I think if you look strictly at his stats, you're kind of like, this dude, like, why did we pay him so much? But he's in Buffalo. He's in Buffalo where they were putrid. So any real, like, he's probably seen 50 shots a game, so if he's allowing 4 goals on 50 shots, that's pretty good. It's not great, but it's a lot better than what the surface looks like. I think he was a 500 goalie in Buffalo, which, if you can be a 500 goalie in Buffalo, you should be all right in Boston. I would like to think we're a much better team than Buffalo, but if everyone makes the jump they're expecting, or if the majority of the guys make the jump they're expecting to, and these new additions really fill into the role they're supposed to, we're going to be all right. We're going to be another playoff team again. And then hopefully come trade deadline, we add 1 or 2 pieces that we really need to make another deep run.
I thoroughly enjoyed the jabs at our resident Buffalo Sabres Couch Guy Sports affiliate here. So let's move on to our next segment. It's penalty shots. We're gonna each give our own hot take for the upcoming season. It can be NHL, it can be Bruins. I want to mostly focus on Bruins, but if you have one for the NHL too, you can throw that out there. Chris, I'm going to start with you.
So I think that the Bruins are going to try incredibly hard during the season to sign Charlie McAvoy, and he's going to shut that down, and that's going to be the story that's going to be overlooking the entire season, no matter how good or bad this team is playing. And if they play bad, that is going to be the bigger driving story around Boston. And then I think that if they aren't playing well and he's not signed, the narrative of should the Bruins trade him, what could they get back, blah, blah, blah. I think that could be a huge storyline for the year. I think, obviously will translate into a lot of content and clicks. But I think that that's probably, or could be a potential issue for the Bruins, because typical New England fans, we like to put the cart before the horse all the time. So the second that this team doesn't play well, people are going to want to start talking about it. And I would not be shocked that if this team got off to a slow start, that, for example, Felger and Maz, they basically are the pulse of what Boston sports talk is throughout all of New England and beyond. The second they bring up that narrative, that now becomes the gospel of what Boston sports is. So getting out ahead of it early right now, and that I'm going to say that if they're not playing well, the McAvoy contract is going to be an issue this season.
I completely agree with that Felger Maz statement. It's already starting on the Patriots front, as we've all seen already, the Mac Jones and Love and all that stuff. Kevin, what's your hot take here for the Bruins this upcoming season?
Yeah, I'll keep it with the Bruins. I'll go the guy that's in between the pipes. I think once Rask is cleared, it's going to be interesting how that's handled. How is it handled? Do you carry all 3 guys? Who gets the majority of the playing time? And I think that's strictly how is the goaltending throughout the regular season? How does Swayman and Allmark really handle the roles? Those are going to be the 2 guys that are carrying us to playoff time. And once Rask is back, because he said he'll play for the league minimum or whatever it was. So I would imagine he is going to be putting back on the spoke to be. So just how that's handled, and how does, we touched on it earlier, how does the Boston media, Boston fans handle the goaltending situation? Because Swayman's young, Allmark's, he's still young. He's still only 27. So both guys are going to have their ups and downs. And if that comes with how they treated Tuukka Rask and how people continue to treat him, that's going to be interesting, because, whatever you want to say, and I've been probably the biggest critic of Tuukka Rask too. I think that when the push comes to shove, there's times he's checked out. And for me, Yeah, harshly, but that's what you expect here. And we don't expect to just be a playoff team. We want a Stanley Cup. We've been waiting 10 years. So 10 years seems like an eternity for Boston, especially our demographic. So like Chris said earlier, it all starts with the guys in between the net. How good's your goaltending? How good's the guy, that is the final defense of stopping the puck from going in. And I think we're in good shape. I think we'll be in really good shape, but give them time to allow to them to go through their take their lumps. Give them time. It's a long season. There's a lot of ups and downs. If you go through a period where both guys stink for 2 or 3 games, it'll be okay. We'll always come out on the other side. So take it easy on this too.
It's really hard to believe it's been 10 years since the last time they won the cup, and so many opportunities in between that. For my hot take, I'm gonna go back to Charlie McAvoy for a second. It's been a long time coming, but I think this is going to be the year he finally wins that James Norris Trophy. He deserved it last year. Obviously, Adam Fox played better and had the better statistics, obviously, but I do think he's going to play his way into a contract this year, whether or not it's with the Bruins or not. That's what seems to be the question right now. He seems to not. Rumors came out today that he's not worried about the contract talks right now. So, I mean, that's kind of it's not worrisome, but I think he's going to play his way into. If he wins the James Norris Trophy this year, I think he's going to play his way into a big payday here. Come the next offseason.
I mean, they don't really have a choice but to pay him. They have to pay him. Who's your number one guy if he walks?
Exactly.
So, yeah, and you know what? Playing devil's advocate, if his play demands the money, pay the man. Don't cheap out on us now. The guy's going to be your number 1D. Pay him like he's your number 1D.
Chris, you got anything?
I cannot agree more. You have to take care of McAvoy. You don't really have anything else coming up in the pipeline to replace him. You don't have a number 1 prospect like that to come up and replace. They have a bunch of guys that are within their program, but they're not, that they're not ready. So, I think you pay him. I think you pay him and get that out of the way, and you figure out the rest. You've signed the goalie. You've got the money tied into the goaltender. Now you go and you solidify your number 1. You still got Bergeron, albeit he's getting a year older every year. You still got Marchand. You still got Pasternak. The core of what you have is still there. You can nickel and dime your way and add other pieces like you did during this offseason to complement the rest of the roster. But Sweeney needs to begin to kind of get back to the roots of his drafting and kind of begin to bring in some players here, and not like the Zach Sinishins of the world, but actual players and come in and impact the roster.
We don't talk about that draft, that Sinishin draft. That's a hard no on that one. And before we get to our last segment and the close of this, let's talk about that core for a second. It's not many years left with these guys. It's a weird question, but what's the window for this team now? We're in the final years of our core of Bergeron, Marchand. Obviously, Krejci's gone now, so that's part of your core. What's the window here? Can they get into that window? Kevin, you go ahead and take this one first.
Yeah, that's tough. Like Chris said, Bergeron's getting older. Marchand, he's not a young guy anymore either. He's getting up there. So the window is rapidly closing. If I had to really put a number on it, 2 years, and it may be 1. You could make a case that it may be 1. This may be the year that you have to go and do it. 3, I think, is way too, you're outside the window. I don't think 3 years from now, Bergeron is the same guy. So I really think 2 is the cap. This has got to be the year you make that strong push. Next year, if you don't do it this year, you got to get some serious help in. And not to mention that, not to say that any of these young guys could make that next step and kind of elevate their game to another level. And that reopens the window again. But with what we've seen from the end of last year to really now, 2 years max. And I think they can do it, but they gotta, at the end of the day, we've thought they were going to win the Stanley Cup for the last 5 years. So, at the end of the day, we don't have the cup yet. So saying 2 years, we need to go and do it. And we need to do whatever it takes to get the Stanley Cup back in Boston.
Chris, what's your window here for the Boston Bruins in this core?
I think if you are saying it's just this year, then I think people are going to be disappointed because I just don't think that they're a Stanley Cup contender. I'm concerned about the defense and that depth for the longevity of a full season, just based off of what we saw last year. So I would say at least 2 years. Even when Bergeron's contract theoretically is up and he still wants to play, I still think that he's going to play here. I don't think it's going to be a Chara situation just yet. He can still play at a decent level. So, but again, the Bruins have put together some teams and they, are the top of the conference with points. And you're like, how did they end up doing that with the players in the roster? So they could surprise us. I think offensively they got some tools, and I think some of these dudes that they signed are going to be able to complement that bottom of the roster that they've kind of struggled to kind of, have some consistency with. I'm just concerned on the defense. So I would go 2 years right now. And I think that anything more than that, if anyone was to say, oh, well, you still have Pasternak, I just don't want to, not to, and this is a 95 thing where you don't want to like cross sports. I kind of look at like Pasta and like Xander Bogaerts, like as the same type of like where they are in their careers. You know what I mean? Like you have them in their prime of their career, don't waste it. So, hopefully Sweeney and the group there are looking at it that way, and they can just go ahead and kind of do what needs to be done. And that is continue to build this defense, sign McAvoy, and you can extend the window a little bit more.
I'll another little quick comment. Sorry.
Go right ahead, man. Go right ahead.
Dude, I think what my take really was just more of, not to say Bergeron's not going to be able to play again, but is he going to be the top guy, the number one guy on a Stanley Cup contending team 2, 3, 4 years from now? He'll 100% stay on the Bruins and factor in as that third, fourth line, whatever it is, whatever the talent dictates at that point in his career. Like, I don't think he's outside, he's retiring at the end of next year. I think it's more, you have him still playing at a high level. That's where you need to capitalize. Is Bergeron continue to stay? Like no one's questioning whether he should be moved to the second, third line. Everyone knows that's our guy. He's the best two-way forward in hockey right now, as far as I'm concerned. And the veteran leadership that he brings is a whole nother element. So that's really where I look at it as you still have Bergeron, I think, for a year or two at the top of his game. That kind of, you're still an elite top 3 forward. And we need to capitalize on that because I don't know who's taking his spot. I don't know who's stepping in as that number one center. And that's really where I'm at.
And you guys are completely right. And it's a very murky window once this core leaves, and something none of Boston fans want to think about right now. So with that being said, we're gonna move on to our last segment. And Chris mentioned it a little bit at the top of the podcast. It's called Light the Lamp, where when we do this as a weekly thing starting during the season, we will give our predictions for the week about the Bruins. But today we'll mix it up a little bit and do our predictions for the upcoming Bruins season. What you think is going to happen? Whatever you want to do for the upcoming Bruins season. Are they going to win the Stanley Cup? How far are they going to make it? Chris, let's start with you. What is your prediction for the upcoming Bruins season?
I think the Bruins make the postseason, and I'm going to probably go to the extent of that. I think right now we haven't seen anything yet, right? So we haven't seen the puck drop. We haven't gotten to see how this team is going to play. I'm excited for a full season of Taylor Hall in a Bruins sweater. That I'm excited about. I'm looking forward to the goaltending and seeing how Allmark plays within this situation. I do think right now, if you're just going to grade it on paper, it's a playoff team. They don't make the playoffs. It's super disappointing. But I think they're a playoff team, and I think where they're currently at, I don't think anything out of the realm of getting into the second round right now I think getting in the second round is fair. Let's see how the first couple of months unfold and what moves that Sweeney can make to continue to build around. And then we can adjust back on that.
Yeah, I'm not far off from Chris. They're 100%. If they don't make the playoffs, that's a failure season, 100%. You can't argue that because you have the Pasternaks, the Marchands, the Bergerons, the Taylor Halls, the McAvoys. You got the group there that can get you into the playoffs. So there's no excuse for them not to make the playoffs. I want to say Eastern Conference Finals, but I have no faith in the front office to bring in the guys that we're gonna need down the stretch to get us there. How well are they going to develop these guys? Are they going to go out at the deadline and get someone that really, really impacts us and helps us get to that next level? You can say Taylor Hall did that last year. I would agree, but he slowed down in the playoffs. So it's kind of,
he definitely helped get them to that point, to the postseason. Because in the point in the playoffs, Taylor Hall disappeared.
Right.
And, you're not able to, you can't have a guy like him being paid the money that he's being paid, being on the line that he's going to be on, disappear in the postseason. So I think that Sweeney can make the move to do it, because I think this past trade deadline for me, I felt like was one of the few that they literally they went out and they attacked need, and those players that they brought back, Lazar, Hall, and Riley, I felt stepped up, but in that window of to the point of the trade to the postseason. So right. I think he's got the cojones to make the move, like he did it with Nash a few years back. It's really just a matter of, all right, you've invested now in the players you've invested, plus you made those moves last year. Now you're going to go next step. What that is yet, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think, and that was going to be kind of feeding in my next point. Getting into the playoffs is one season. The playoffs is a whole nother season. Like your main objective right now, get into the playoffs, and then season 2 starts. That because it's a whole new year. Anything can happen. You've seen it. You saw it last year in the playoffs. Teams that you did not expect to win were sweeping people, So, those additions helped us get there. Can we get that playoff difference maker? Because Krejci was that guy. He, for whatever reason, the last few years went to another level in the playoffs. He was dominant 2 years ago, 3 years ago in the playoffs. You're kind of like, whoa, can you do this for an entire season? And, I think that's where it is that bigger hit with him departing and going back home. Hall has the ability. We keep saying it. Hall has the ability. So does he make that step? And if he does, watch out. I think if Hall makes that step, I can see us. We're fighting for the Stanley Cup Finals. I don't think we're winning it, but I think we're fighting to get in it.
And I totally agree with that. And you look at the way everything's back to normal this year, with the divisions back to where everything is supposed to be. It's gonna be a lot tougher. It's gonna be a little bit tougher, but you're not in that division where you have just a slaughterhouse of the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals for 9 games, and you're getting Tom Wilson every other day now. I agree with you guys. I think it's going to be a playoff push. I'm not going to go any further than to explain how far they're going to go, because it's hard to tell right now how far they're going to go. But I do believe that Taylor Hall will have a great season. I think David Pasternak's going to have another fantastic season. But I'll stick with what I said for my hot take. I think Charlie McAvoy is going to be a big reason this team is going to the playoffs this coming season. I think his defense is going to be just outstanding this year, and he's going to show why he deserves a contract and why Don Sweeney in that front office needs to re-sign him right away. I mean, they should re-sign him right now before the season starts. You probably get him at a cheaper rate at this point, because once he goes off, that kid is going to get paid a lot of money, whether it's by the Bruins or not.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. The other question is, I think they need to get more physical I think they now that need another big body guy where you go into a 7-game series, we got pushed around. So I think that's another element to consider. What does that cost? Obviously, you don't want to pay for that element. That's more of a fourth line guy that you throw your weight around a little bit that pays dividends in a 7-game series. Like you said, you mentioned, Jeff, you mentioned Tom Wilson. So, someone's got to answer to that guy.
Yeah.
If you somehow find yourself into a 7-game series with Tom Wilson on the other bench, who answers to him? Trent Frederick?
And remember, that was supposed to be Nick Ritchie this last year or two, and he kind of showed it a little bit in the bubble season a couple years ago. Obviously, there was a few unnecessary hits that he gave out during that Tampa Bay series, but Nick Ritchie was supposed to be that guy. When you traded for him, he was supposed to be that Milan Lucic type guy that was supposed to, would light up these big guys that, are wrecking havoc. But last season, he just never showed that. And now obviously he's with Toronto. So that's besides the point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see. And I think you had a good take of just playoffs is a whole different ball game. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Chris, do you have anything to say or?
No, I think I think it's a good solid start.
Yeah. First episode in the books, guys. We're excited to get this rolling. Once the season starts, we are definitely going to do this a weekly thing. Hopefully every Tuesday night we will be Wednesday we'll be dropping this. Guys, thank you so much for being here, obviously, and hopefully here in the next couple of weeks, once the Bruins season starts, we'll be doing a weekly podcast and hopefully talk about a winning season in a season that can turn out well for this Bruins team.
Hope so.
Yeah, I got faith. I think this will be a good podcast with a lot of content that we will have to talk about.
Once again, guys, this has been the Shorthanded Take podcast brought to you by Couch Guys Sports and Exogun. We will see you all soon and enjoy the rest of your off season up until the NHL season starting in October.